everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom. Tom, how's it going?
Well, Tony, we normally start this by talking about what we are going to be talking about on the episode. I think it's important for us to let people know what we're not going to be talking about on this episode. Going to give everyone a little break from Ohio State and Michigan. Feels like our core audience might appreciate that, although our the folks that sort of parachute in for us once a week during football season, or maybe for a whole week towards Thanksgiving or so, might not appreciate that as much. But I think the core audience is ready for a talk of something else. So let's do that, Tony.
Some palate cleansing, if you will. And if there's any Michigan talk that you wanted to hear from us, we have the 90-minute instant reaction show after the game, and then the 13 hours before the game, of the week. That if there's anything that you missed, trust me, it's all in there. Go give that a listen if you're desperate for that sort of stuff. But I do initially want to start off something that has to do with the Michigan game, and that would be the recruiting visitors from a gigantic recruiting weekend for the Buckeyes. You have talked with Alex Gleitman on the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning about a lot of this stuff, so I'd invite everybody to go check that out if you haven't yet. When is that? When should they check that out, Tom?
They should check that out immediately, like possibly even before they listen to this show, because that will have dropped by the time this one drops. That one will have dropped, and Alex and Mark are the two people who, when I have questions about recruiting, I go talk to them, and it's like, okay, good. Now I can sound smart because I have talked to the smart people. It's like talking to Ross about scheme stuff, or anyone else. What do I feel about smart about when I talk to you?
Yourself?
Yeah, it is it's a self-esteem booster. Yes. So there you go. So yeah, see everyone, Tony, we all have our roles here. Mm-hmm, so yes, so you can find the Alex Gleitman. I talked to him about 4 guys. I think we have 3 guys on the list here, but I talked to him about 4 different guys and their visits, and will that be able to get them to flip to Ohio State, keep them from flipping away from Ohio State? So you can find that on the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning feed or at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle.
Yeah, and I just wanted to touch on 3 guys who were committed to other schools when they visited. First, quarterback Lucas Kienholz out of South Dakota committed to Washington. He's been rising up the rankings ever since I think Ohio State really got involved. And the thing that I think Buckeye fans might like most about him is that he rushed for over 1,400 yards last year. This year as a senior, threw for over 3,400. So he's a mobile guy. And recently we know Brock Glenn decommitted and committed to Florida State. Ohio State's 2023 quarterback decommitted and committed to Florida State. And this was reported by Alex and Mark, I believe, both as a mutual thing. And so you don't cut Brock Glenn free if you aren't planning on replacing him. I believe with Lucas Kienholz. Is that what your thought is as well?
Well, I think the order of operations here is kind of significant and kind of tells the story a little bit, where Corey Dennis made a trip to South Dakota, and it was not for recreational purposes. It was to go scout Lucas Kienholz in person. And then once he came back, then you started hearing the Brock Glenn might decommit. Like the order of events here is somewhat telling to me. And yeah, I mean, he hasn't decommitted yet. He's going to go home. He's going to take a few days to a few weeks to make his decision. Alex said this is one that could go all the way to early signing day, but if you are a commit from Washington and you are, taking that trip, I think, the argument for Lucas Kienholz moving is it's Ohio State. Have you seen how they develop quarterbacks versus how Washington develops quarterbacks? And the argument for staying with Washington is, are you just sort of a placeholder between the, Devin Brown and Kyle McCord, and then the Dylan Raiola on the other side of things, or do you have a legitimate chance to win the job? And, Alex thinks that they have done a good enough job selling him on the fact that, if we didn't think you could play here, we wouldn't be recruiting you. So we'll see, but that one is one that might go all the way to early signing day.
Yeah, Washington, you have Michael Penix there. I have to believe this is his last year, but has been leading the nation in passing yards most of the season. That's got to be an enticing offense for a high school quarterback. So to then look at Ohio State the way he is, it's pretty significant. Defensive end Joshua Mickens out of Lawrence Central High School in Indianapolis was committed to LSU, visited Ohio State, and then magically decommits. Everybody right now expecting him to land with Ohio State. He's a number 113 player overall, number 12 edge rusher in the 2023 class. Really, Tom, I think the importance of Mickens grows more and more the longer Ohio State has to wait on Damon Wilson and Mateo Uiagalelei, because both of those guys have felt like they're going to be in the fold, and yet here we are, fold after fold after fold, and they're nowhere to be found in there. And losing 3 senior defensive ends this year, yeah, sure, you signed 3 last year, but I think you need to keep replacing the guys that are going, and you can't strike out on all of these defensive ends that you're after.
Well, yeah, they have the 3 5-star kind of guys. You mentioned Wilson and Uiagalelei. There's also Keon Keeley, who is probably staying somewhere down south, Alabama maybe. But, you would certainly think and hope, I'm sure they are hoping they get, 1 or 2 of Uiagalelei and Wilson. But yeah, if you can add Mickens was in Columbus for an unofficial visit for the Indiana game, back for the Michigan game, and then decommits from LSU. I think we can probably all read the tea leaves there, but yeah, I think defensive end is also one of those positions where it's kind of like everything right now. You kind of need more depth than you used to, because with the amount of turnover that I think you're going to see in the coming weeks from every program, I think you're going to have, whatever used to be the safe number of guys, I think the safe number of guys is higher than it used to be at all of those positions, because I think you're just going to see more turnover at every program. It's just, if someone on our board asked, over under 10 guys transfer out in the portal this offseason, and I said, I think 10 might just sort of be like the new normal. Some schools will lose 8, some schools will lose 12. The ones that have the big cultural issues will lose 20, but 10 feels like that might just sort of be the norm now. So with that much turnover, I think it's going to be, it is going to be super important to not have the class where you strike out and take 2 offensive linemen or 1 defensive end. You've got to keep that cupboard stocked, because you're going to have more churn than you have in the past.
Yeah, and as I've said before, the coaches have allowed the players to kind of take ownership of being cut, and they're using it. They're making the most of this roster management that looks to be a benefit for the players, but is also being beneficial for the coaches when they can bring in as many guys as they can in recruiting and in the portal. I was with you on that same question, because I can go and look and see 12 or 13 guys that I think could, potentially leave, and not because I think the question was, because of this loss, what's the number going to be? And I don't think the loss to Michigan affected any of the guys that I was thinking of in terms of putting numbers to it. So yeah, like 10 seems pretty standard. The last guy I want to talk about, Tom, is safety Caleb Downs, 5-star committed to Alabama, number 1 safety in the land. Wasn't sure if he was going to be visiting Ohio State. Had to kind of do it on the down low, but did show up. And it's one of these things, you're taking a visit for a reason, and you're trying to keep it quiet for a reason. Obviously, he didn't want to deal with Alabama fans on social media, and obviously probably wanted to wait as long as possible before the Alabama coaches found out, just because it's one of those things. But you got him on campus. That was the first step. And then, you show them what you can, and then I guess some in-home visits later on to try and seal the deal.
Yeah, and this is one of those where just getting him on campus is a win. Getting him on campus was sort of the absolute bare minimum table stakes to be in the conversation to flip him later. They did that. This is not a visit you take lightly. This is not a just sort of like, do this on a whim instead of going to the Iron Bowl where I am committed, go to the Ohio State Michigan game instead. We'll see how it all pans out. There was a report at one point that he had left the game early. Then none of that, according to what Alex was told, none of that was true. And now it's a dogfight now. And we have seen Alabama flip Ohio State commits on early signing day in the past, and now Ohio State's going to try and return the favor here. And, this is one where I don't think you can say, yeah, Ohio State is definitely going to do this, or Ohio State's definitely not going to do this. But if someone's committed to another school and now Ohio State's certainly in the picture and has, convinced him to take the trip, that is a better position than they were in a week ago. So now if you're Ohio State, you just sort of hope you can maintain that positive momentum from a good visit.
Ran into somebody on the sidelines beforehand, and he was talking about Caleb Downs and saying if anybody is visiting at this point, they're going to flip. And this is a guy like in the know in the recruiting world or in how things operate. I don't know if the game changed that. I think there's certainly saw ample opportunity for Caleb Downs himself to see himself in this defense and perhaps play pretty early. But we will see. Tom, now I want to talk about a very busy day of college coaching carousel on Monday. You had Nebraska hiring Matt Rhule and announcing it, Wisconsin announcing Luke Fickell, and then also Auburn hiring Hugh Freeze.
One of these things is not like the others.
Let's just start with Freeze, but then we can move to the Big Ten and discuss that. I think anytime you hire a known cheater, you are doing it because you want him to cheat. Now, cheating is different in today's game, but you're hiring somebody who cuts corners because you want them to cut corners, or else you wouldn't hire them because you don't want them to cut corners. So this is Auburn openly admitting we're going to do everything we can to win. I guess that's one thing, but this is for a program that tried to create a narrative about the morality of Brian Harsin to then go and bring in Hugh Freeze. It's kind of hypocritical to me.
It is this is very much hire the opposite of your ex. It is, and I think, whatever. Auburn paying football players. Wow, now I've seen everything, Tony. It's an ongoing investigation. Smile into camera. This is honestly the paying players thing is like the least gross thing about Hugh Freeze. Like, Hugh Freeze is just one of those people that when you go around the college football world and you can't find anyone to say good stuff about you, like Bobby Petrino's kind of like that, where Bobby Petrino's been a bunch of places, and anyone from any of those schools, you ask them about Bobby Petrino, it's just kind of like, ugh, that guy. Like, that's kind of Hugh Freeze. It just leaves, it's like Pigpen in the Peanuts cartoons, where it just has that like trail of dirt behind him. That's kind of Hugh Freeze, except it's kind of slime. Like, you can look at what he did. There's stuff going back to when he was a high school coach where it's like, there's some weird stuff with girls that girls reported weird stuff at the high school he coached at. And it just, being in the DMs of someone who was critical of Ian McCall and the Baylor rape thing this year. It's just not great. And, and you look at his numbers and it's like, did you look at the last 3 weeks of Liberty this year? Like, they lost to UConn. Did you see Baylor, Liberty? This is one of the things that gets lost when we're covering a game. I didn't see this until like Sunday afternoon. They lost by literally 35 points to literally New Mexico State on Sunday. Do you know how bad New Mexico State is? Holy Moses. Yeah, he's fine as a coach, but it's just, I don't know. And with NIL now, I'm sure, Auburn's going to have the NIL money cannon turned up to 11, but, if paying players under the table is not the advantage it used to be, then, we'll see. I put it this way. I'm a lot more confident that when this ends, it's going to end very badly and in a really gross kind of way than I am that there's going to be something really good that happens to Auburn before it ends really badly.
And Hugh Freeze has beaten Nick Saban a couple of times, but yeah, they're not hiring him because of his winning. I think they're hiring because of what he's been able to do to win, and you figure you can amp that up even more at Auburn. We shall see. Tom, Matt Rhule to Nebraska, like $74 million. I have not yet seen what Luke Fickell's contract is at Wisconsin, but I was completely shocked by the Luke Fickell thing to Wisconsin because we were somewhere, it was like late last week, where it sounded like Jim Leonhard and Wisconsin were getting ready. Like, so there were reports that Jim Leonhard and Wisconsin were getting ready to sign something long term. And so that's where I left it. I thought it was done. And then all of a sudden, Wisconsin is talking to Luke Fickell, and then like an hour later, it's done. And I think this is a tremendous spot for Luke Fickell, who likes to be somewhere that is good, but also that is patient. And he will have that at Wisconsin. It can do some things. I think this is a great fit for him. I just think, boy, I got a feel for Jim Leonhard. Sure, he's making plenty of money, but for your school, your alma mater, to be like, no. Well, would you like to be our defensive coordinator? It's kind of like what Ohio State did with Urban Meyer and Luke Fickell. But I just, as I tweeted, like, this is how supervillains are made when you treat somebody like they did with Jim Leonhard.
My professional advice to Jim Leonhard would be to go back in time and not lose to Minnesota, because, if you don't lose to Minnesota, then you're 7-5, and it's really not quite fair because they didn't lose. They lost to Minnesota because their offense was bad, which is really not the side of the ball that Jim Leonhard had anything to do with. But don't lose to Minnesota, and you're maybe having a different conversation today. But yeah, if you can get Luke Fickell, go ahead and have this be Jim Leonhard's super, Joker origin story. Like, that's fine. If that's what it is, like, if getting Luke Fickell, we're going to do a Big Ten coach ranking thing next, and I'm going to say Luke Fickell's name real early. So get ready for that. But this is a great culture, a great fit, a great cultural fit. He's in the region. It's not, he doesn't have a ton of Wisconsin ties, but who I think this is real bad news for, Tony?
Kentucky, Michigan State, those schools who like to rely on Ohio recruiting.
Kentucky, Michigan State, and those other schools that like to rely on that sort of second tier of Ohio recruiting. Once you get the Ohio State kind of level guys out, those, like, I think Mel Tucker had a bad day on Monday, and he's had a few bad days. You're gonna be waiting a while until I say Mel Tucker's name when we get to that exercise. But as far as Fickell goes, yes, I think that's a great fit. I think he's going to do really well at Wisconsin. We'll see how life at Wisconsin is in a divisionless Big Ten. That that life may get a little harder than it has been, but in a more difficult world, they are better positioned with Luke Fickell than they would be with just about any of their other options.
Yeah, I think Wisconsin fans probably, you start to get married to the idea that Jim Leonhard is going to be fine, and he'll get it turned around or take it to another level. And then you start hearing Luke Fickell, who is like the hottest guy. There's Lincoln Riley and then Luke Fickell, and for Wisconsin to get the number 2 guy out there, not that he was even out there, but they went and got him, and they have to be thrilled with that because it's not a culture change. It's not a drastic or dramatic change. Like, he can take what they're doing and just continue it and elevate it. So yeah, I wonder if it was a coincidence that today or Tuesday, Monday and Tuesday, or Sunday and Monday, where you have Michigan taking commitments from 3 or 4 Ohio kids that didn't have Ohio State offers. So it's like they're trying to beat Luke Fickell to the punch, maybe. But again, that's going to be a Michigan problem too when Luke Fickell gets there. So I think that's really good. Matt Rhule at Nebraska, I think there's some genius there, because Nebraska is best when they can get into Texas. Matt Rhule, being a former Baylor coach, has those ties. Now, the good thing is he hasn't been gone for long. It's been 2 years at Carolina, so he still has a lot of those ties. So I think that helps them. But overall, like Rhule, I think he's a better college coach than a pro coach, as many college coaches are. I think, what he did at Baylor, if he can do anything like that in Nebraska, that's a win. But as you said, this divisionless Big Ten is going to be fascinating to watch, to see what it does to all of the success, the expectations of the formerly Big Ten West teams, Nebraska in there, probably a notch below or a couple notches below what Luke Fickell and Wisconsin have. But I like the Rhule hire. Can't really say anything negative about it. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he is, I was going through the list of hires this cycle so far, and this is another one where you just kind of go, yeah, that's a good fit. You have not had the, what? You have not had the Herm Edwards hire yet. You have not had, and sometimes those hires work out. Like Jim Mora going to UConn last year was like, I'm sorry, how badly do you want to, are you required to live to be a head coach somewhere? And that one has worked out okay so far. But this is another one that's just kind of geographically it makes sense in terms of a cultural fit and, the type of team he runs, it makes sense. After Scott Frost, after looking at the Scott Frost hire and going, well, if this guy can't win there, no one will ever win there again. I'm a little hesitant to say anything about, expectations for Matt Rhule, but it seems like they ran that was a really interesting one because you didn't hear names, you didn't have leaks. Trev Alberts ran a really, really tight search there where you didn't have just the constant drama and the floating of names, and that was it. I think he did a really nice job there and ended up with a really good coach. And we can talk about Rhule, and yeah, he's only been out of college for the last 3 years. We'll talk about that in a minute when we get to where I've got him ranked. He's only been out of college for the last 3 years. When he walks back in the door, hey, did I miss anything? Everything's still the same as it was 2019? Good, cool, let's go. All right.
Yeah, he's like, it's been a while since I've been here in college, but the number one thing I think we need is a slide. I saw it, Clemson had one, seemed to be doing good for them. Let's do what they're doing. And then it's like, well, Matt, there are some other things. So then, Tom, let's go ahead and rank these guys. And before we do, I have this tweet from January 1st of 2018 that got brought up again on Monday, brought up after Ohio State lost to Michigan last year. And this is my tweet. And it's just this. Is this crazy? I'm ranking Big Ten coaches. 1st, Urban Meyer. 2, Paul Chryst. 3, Mark D'Antonio. 4, James Franklin. 5, Scott Frost. 6, Jeff Brom. And then I have a comment. Is Harbaugh clearly better than Fitzgerald or Fleck or Ferentz or any of the non-F coaches? Does Michigan have a bottom half head coach? Yeah, 7. He had 7 straight losses versus teams ranked at the end of the season. That was in 2018, Tom. And I should not be held responsible for changes that have happened since, in my opinion. But that's how things were back then. And Michigan stayed patient. And now I think for me, I don't know if we want to start first or last, but I've got a new number 1 head coach at the top of my Big Ten rankings. And I honestly don't ever think I never thought that he would be there for me.
Yeah, I think I'm probably with you there. We should just say it at the same time. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Woody Hayes. No? No? Is that not who? No? Oh, sorry.
James Franklin.
Yes. Yeah, no. I started putting my list together and I'm like, boy, you could go back in time about 96 hours and tell me you're going to have Jim Harbaugh at the top of this list. And I'd be like, I don't think that's probably going to be how this plays out. We can go back and relitigate the Ohio State Michigan game and the success rates and all that kind of stuff. But just win, baby, is kind of the thing. And he has just won, baby, the last couple of years and won the Big Ten East and gotten to Indianapolis. And they're like a 20-point favorite, I think, over Purdue. So you're probably having a similar type game to a little more interesting type game than to last year, but probably a similar type game. And you make the college football playoff 2 years in a row and win the Big Ten 2 years in a row and beat Ohio State 2 years in a row. It's like, yeah, I don't think there's anyone else that has a real good claim to that spot.
No, he's done everything that the number 1 coach in the Big Ten should do. And he's done it consecutive years. So yeah, I don't think there's any argument there. Even though we will eventually get to 2022 Big Ten champion head coach Jeff Brom in a bit. But first, Tom, I want to talk about number 2. My number 2 is it's Ryan Day. because he has been usurped and nobody has gone past Ryan. Nobody else has jumped past Ryan Day just yet. I'm interested, do you still have Ryan Day there? And because if you don't, then you might have a new guy there, a new Big Ten coach there. And I'm wondering if we have this, we've got Day and Fickell a little flipped around here. Where are you at?
I think we do have Day and Fickell a little flipped around here. I'm just going to read you Luke Fickell's records at Cincinnati. 4-8. He took over, remember, after Tommy Tuberville. Tommy Tuberville screwed up Cincinnati so badly that he had to go be a U.S. Senator after that. That's how badly he screwed up Cincinnati. 4-8, 11-2, 11-3, 9-1, 13-1, 9-3. In the years 2020 and 2021, his only losses were to Georgia and Alabama. That is the coach at Cincinnati, an AAC team. And, it's very easy to say, well, he's playing an AAC schedule. Well, he beat Notre Dame. He's doing it with AAC players. He's going to go to Wisconsin and have, the probably one, half a grade up from what he had at Cincinnati in terms of players. And I fully expect him to kind of keep things rolling. This year, he was probably a quarterback away from another 12-1 kind of season. I mean, this is, you look at what, and I don't want to start the third base narrative around Ryan Day again, but you look at what Ryan Day took over, and you look at what Luke Fickell took over, and where those, last year, you look at the programs that those guys took over. Last year, Luke Fickell made the playoff. Ryan Day did not, and that is significant to me. So, yeah, I'm going to say this is not a hard and fast, clear delineation between these two guys, but I think it's not quite a coin flip to me either. I think I need Ryan Day to do something else now. Let's see Ryan Day. Let's see how Ryan Day rebounds after getting punched in the face a couple times. But yeah, I've got Luke Fickell too.
Next year, Ohio State goes to Wisconsin. Halloween weekend, Saturday, October 28th, should be a real good time. Although it might just be a noon game, though.
Halloween weekend in Madison. That's going to be a primetime game. That is going to be one of the wilder scenes we've been to. Like, it will not be as loud as the whiteout, but it's going to be maybe more crazy than the whiteout. I am really looking forward to that trip.
Yeah, I hope it is a night game. Buckeye fans probably hoping it's a day game, a big noon kickoff, something like that. But that is going to be a wild one. I've got Luke Fickell third until he does it, until he shows me something in the Big Ten. It's not easy to win in the Big Ten, Tom. I do think you mentioned he was a quarterback away at Cincinnati. You're a quarterback away a lot at Wisconsin. So, I mean, he's going to have to make sure that that's not the situation there. But I think those top three, I'm interested now to see if when we start to really start to change things. Because I'm even looking at my number 4 guy right now, and I think I might have messed up with my 4 and 5. My number 4 guy is James Franklin, and as I'm saying it, I think I've messed it up. But I'm gonna move it. I can do this. There's no legal ease, no laws being broken. Brett Bielema, number 4, to do what he did at Illinois, come in. And 2 years he's been able to turn them into a Big Ten West contender at Illinois, and he wins in the Big Ten his own way. He's a very confident guy. Now a little bit of humility has been mixed in, but he just wins, and he is about as Big Ten as you can get. So number 4 for me, Brett Bielema.
Yeah, I've got Bielema a little further down the list. I would like to see Bielema, we saw Tom Allen a couple of years ago have, the one good offensive player and parlay that into, and it's kind of a weird season, and, some of the powers in the division are down, and all of a sudden Tom Allen is, like almost a top 10 team, and, we've got Tom Allen number 2 on these lists. Like, all right, I'm a little more pump the brakes on the 1 year wonders. So, and because honestly, coaching Wisconsin, like, there is a baseline at Wisconsin that's just like, yeah, he was every other Wisconsin coach over the last 30 years, basically. So I've got him a little lower, and like let's see what he looks like without what's his name, the running back, and if he loses, Chase Brown. Without Chase Brown, if his defensive coordinator loses, let's see if you can sustain that, or if you're back to being 4-8. So I have James Franklin here, and I know James Franklin gets a lot of eye rolls for game management stuff, and it's like, yes, James Franklin is like a C- game manager, but he's like a B+ everywhere else. He's just, he has the program is solid. They have been pretty consistent. They have been, this year they have been clearly better than everyone else they've played. They have been clearly better than 10 teams, and then they have been clearly not as good as 2 teams. And we have already said the names of the 2 coaches ahead of them. And, they are a legitimate, in a year when there are not 10 top 10 teams, really, they're one of the 10 teams that are in the top 10. And like, they're just sort of like very good. They are like the most go to the Cotton Bowl and play whatever AAC team is there and win 31-17. And it's like a game you just completely forget 2 weeks after it happens. And then you'll look back and be like, oh, they were 11-2 and they won a New Year's Six Bowl last year? Really? I don't remember that. It's just sort of this, because they got thumped by Michigan and then they lose to Ohio State, like they've just sort of gotten forgotten. But they have just sort of taken care of business and beaten everyone on their schedule other than those 2. And he's been there long enough that I think you have to give him credit for the consistency of the performance there. And, if you're old enough to remember him at Vanderbilt, he did some stuff at Vanderbilt that nobody has done at Vanderbilt that I think still means something to me, too.
Well, he was also able to do that at Vandy with some really down SEC East teams and programs, but still winning at Vandy, a significant thing. I have him 5 because of the game management stuff. And, I just think there will be opportunities throughout every game where if it's close, he's going to give you an opportunity to win. And I'm talking about the opponent. So that's why I have him at 5. Who do you have at 5?
I've got Jeff Brom. And Brom is another one where you got to kind of look at the trajectory, where he came into Purdue and Purdue has just kind of been, because he replaced Darrell Hazel at Purdue, right? It was Danny Hope and then Darrell Hazel and then Brom, I believe. And 7-6 and 6-7 and 4-8 in his first 3 years, and it's like, yep, that's every Purdue coach. All right, so he's just a Purdue coach. 2-4 the 2020 season, which you just kind of wave off. But then the last 2 years, 9-4 and 8-4. And if you're winning 9 games at Purdue and you have the chance to win 9, you get Purdue to the Big Ten championship game, and I don't know exactly how much credit to give anyone in the Big Ten West, because it's like, everyone was just sort of exactly the same team this year. So, and Wisconsin's a little down. So, okay, the sort of big brother on the West side's a little down. But, the trip to Indianapolis, he still gets to make the trip to Indianapolis this weekend. So you go at 9-4 last year. You're probably losing to Michigan, but you go win the Citrus Bowl, Outback Bowl this year. Maybe you finish, 9-5. That's 9-4 and 9-5 at Purdue is not nothing. And it does feel like he's kind of got that program on decent footing right now, where it's not, you don't look at them, they've done it 2 years in a row, so they're not 1 year wonders. So I think I gotta give him a little more credit than Bielema right now. And, if Bielema does this 2 more years in a row and Brom falls off, then yeah, sure, we can have that conversation about moving Bielema up again.
Tom, who won the game between those 2 teams? I've actually forgotten.
I was going to say, I literally don't know. I have no recollection of who won any games in the Big Ten West at all this season, because frankly, it doesn't matter. They all they all beat each other and they all went 8-4.
Yeah, I do have Jeff Brom 6 for me. I do think he, if you win the Big Ten championship this year, I'll move you up to say 4th. But I think what I like about him is it's an exciting brand of football. They can beat teams that they shouldn't necessarily beat, and then every year in the postseason, in the bowl game, it's gonna be like 52-48, that sort of thing, and it's fun to watch. So who's your number 6? We can run through these pretty quick if you need to.
After Brom, I've got Burt. We've kind of litigated Burt already. So who's your number 6?
My number 6 is Brom. So yeah, okay, number 7, Tom. This is where I bring in Matt Rhule at number 7.
Exactly.
I think this is a good spot for him. ahead of the guys that you know and below the guys that you also know. But this is I think everybody below him, there's plenty of reason for it. No great reason to have him above any of the guys that we have above him at this point. So this is a perfect spot for him. It's like the Big Ten mandated it for us.
Yeah, and he's someone who, if you hired him straight off of his 3 seasons at Baylor, he might be number 2 on this list or 3 on this list. He went to Baylor in the wake of the Art Briles situation, and that was a program that had been nuked, and they had what's his name, the old Wake Forest coach, as an interim for a season.
Oh yes,
and yeah, and I think that was when he took over. He took over in November, and they had like 1 kid in the recruiting class. Like, it was like as barren a nuclear winter of a program as you could possibly take over. And then he was there 3 seasons, 1-11 in the first one, which was like a straight up year 0, and then 7-6, and then 11-3, and then he went off to the NFL. And I don't know, I don't follow the NFL. I'm sure it went great anyway. But now he's back in college. And I honestly would probably have him 2 to 3 spots higher if it wasn't for the fact that his last season was 2019, and now you've got a lot of stuff to get caught up on, and NIL and the transfer portal. Like, you have been a college football coach before, but you have not been a college football coach in this college football. So let's see. There are coaches who adapt well to it, and there are coaches who don't. We don't know how he'll do, but he was pretty darn good before in the old college football.
So now we're looking at the final 7, the bottom 7, and I feel like the 5 in there before the bottom 2 could be in any order.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can, and I don't even know that we need to go through the orders. In fact, it's some semblance of Pat Fitzgerald, PJ Fleck, Kirk Ferentz, Mike Locksley, Greg Schiano. That's the order I put them in: Fitzgerald, Fleck, Ferentz, Locksley, and Schiano. And I could probably do it 6 different ways, 6 different times. What order did you go with those guys?
I've got Ferentz, Fleck, Locksley, Schiano, Fitzgerald. I mean, Fitzgerald. I think you could look at Kirk Ferentz and go, well, he got them to the Big Ten championship game last year, and he's done this for such a long time and has been so consistent. And here's the thing, Tony: offense is a part of football too. So you have to put. Occasionally put others ahead of your own personal interests if you're going to be the head coach of a team. So that's why he's not higher for me. Fleck has been good. Fleck has been consistent. Fleck is weird and has his own little quirks and all that, but he has been a good coach and does, he has gotten them to, what did they go to? The Citrus Bowl? Yeah, they went to the Citrus Bowl the one year where they beat Auburn. All of these games kind of blend together, but yeah, it was like 10 wins, 11 wins a couple of years ago. I mean, that's not nothing. And it feels like he's got them in a spot where they are going to win 7-8 games every year. And for Minnesota, like, you're back in Glenn Mason territory, and that's pretty good. I've got Locksley ahead of Schiano here, and that's just based on Locksley. The talent at Maryland is better than the talent at Rutgers. They just killed Rutgers last week. I was pretty sure Schiano was going to be able to get Rutgers up to 7 wins again at some point, and we'll see what life looks like in the post-division Big Ten. But they're not quite where I thought they would be at. I didn't think they'd be at the 7-8 win level yet, but I thought they'd be a more competitive 6-ish win team, at least like really threatening a bowl game. And they got thumped often enough this year that it was like, all right, they're a little behind schedule, I think.
Yeah, and they have some really uncompetitive losses that shouldn't necessarily be that way in conference play. Fitzgerald, I'm one of his biggest critics. I think he's overrated, but also it's hard for me to ignore the 2 Big Ten championship game appearances. I think a lot of that is also predicated on the rest of the Big Ten West. That's like part of the reason why I have Ferentz not as high as maybe some might, is because, well, I think a lot of your success is because you're in this division and you guys just trade basically. This is your turn to have a good year because of your schedule, and you've got more seniors. And that's just really the cycle of the Big Ten West. Tom, I went, in terms of my bottom two, obviously I went as my bottom guy, my number 14 bottom coach, as the most likely to be fired next. And I think that's Tom Allen. Now, I think there's a good argument to have Mel Tucker last because of how much, just because of his whole thing, the smoke and mirrors aspect of it, but also Tom Allen had some of that as well. I went Tom Allen last because he is more fireable. He will be fired. Mel Tucker can't be fired. So that's why I went Tucker 13, Allen 14.
Yeah, it's like when they do the trade rankings, the MLB trade rankings or the NBA trade rankings, and you have to take the contract into account. Like, you boy, the $95 million, Tony. $95 million. Jimbo Fisher versus Mel Tucker. Jimbo Fisher did beat LSU last week, so that's something. Yeah, let's touch real briefly on Pat Fitzgerald, because I think Pat Fitzgerald is, you want to talk about someone who's not going to get fired. Like, what would it take for Pat Fitzgerald to get fired at Northwestern? He is like Mr. Northwestern, and it feels like he just he's like the locusts or the cicadas or whatever it is, where, just every 4 years he comes out of the ground and wins 9 games and gets to Indianapolis and then loses to Ohio State, and then they go and play in the Citrus Bowl or the Outback Bowl, and then they go back into hibernation and they have a bunch of 3-9 seasons, and then everything lines up again, and then all of a sudden they have a bunch of 23-17 wins, and they're back in the Big Ten championship game again somehow. Yeah, they were so bad this year. They were like non-competitive bad this year, and we'll see. It would probably not be bad for him to have a 7-8 win season next year. That would probably be a good idea. I wonder about that program, like the Northwesterns, the Stanfords. I wonder about that, the Vanderbilts. I wonder about that type of program in the transfer portal world, because if you have the good player, sometimes you get, Peter Skorsky who will stay for the full time. They just lost the safety to Notre Dame this offseason, and the tough part about Northwestern is you can't just bring in any transfer from, this kid was good at Florida State, so let's bring him in. It's like Northwestern looks at that as like, is that a middle school transcript? What? No, I'm sorry. Those aren't, no, that's not, Is
this crayon?
Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry. Coloring is not a credit that we're going to be able to transfer here. I'm very sorry. I wonder about the realities for Northwestern in the new NIL and, transfer portal kind of world. But yeah, he's someone who I don't think he's in any real danger of getting fired, but it's been pretty bad the last couple of years. So we'll see if he can kind of pull them out of that nosedive. Tom Allen, man, holy smokes. That went from going real well in 2020 to real badly very quickly, and has not shown any real sign of life since then. He definitely feels like the most likely to get fired at some point. Big Ten didn't fire anyone last year, and I don't think they fired. Oh, they fired Frost this year already. Yeah, but and Christ, yeah. So they've had a couple of coaching changes already. He's. I feel like Allen's the next one to go. Tucker, yeah, that was at the time that contract came out. It was like, we're doing this based on what now? You had the 1 year where it was, you got all the transfer guys and it all lined up well, and they beat Michigan, and everyone just lost their mind. And it was like, okay, you saw the Ohio State game, right? You saw that this was a completely non-competitive team against a better opponent. And, very much not a top 10 caliber team based on that. And then they go and they beat Pitt in the Peach Bowl without Kenny Pickett. And it's like, yeah, without Kenneth Walker as well. Okay, yep, sure, stipulated. You beat Pitt without its quarterback in a year when Pitt's whole thing was its quarterback. So, like, yeah, you won a New Year's Six game. That's good. $95 million. Like, they put that in like they were so sure. And it's like, are you sure you're sure? Because I'm not sure you're sure. And this year looked like, I was in that post-game press conference after the Ohio State game, and that was a dude that had no answers. And that was the middle of the season, and it didn't get materially better. And then you've got the story coming out about the $100,000 bonus that he was, supposed to split with his assistants. And he's like, nah, I'm just going to keep that myself. Like, yo, dude, that's not going to win you a lot of friends. That is not, I don't remember that chapter in how to win friends and influence people. That is not how to keep a happy program there. So yeah, that feels like that might go bad and, be one of those situations where it's just the unhappy marriage where they can't afford to fire him and he can't, he doesn't want to walk away from the money. So it's just like, oh, it is a real miserable 5-7 for the foreseeable future.
They're staying together for the kids and the kids don't even want them together either. Like, just please get divorced. Would you please? But in terms of like, best bargains, Tom Allen's much higher up the list, and Mel Tucker is the absolute worst bargain of any of the Big Ten coaches. You got anything else before we go?
I'm with you. I think the one thing that would be very interesting to me on the Luke Fickell contract, because I think you said you had not seen terms on that. What's the buyout to get Luke Fickell out of that contract? Because that's something where, how long is he going to be at Wisconsin? Because he could be at Wisconsin forever, basically, I think. But, if Mama calls at some point, I don't know that there's any number that would keep Ohio State from being able to hire him away if that ends up being a thing at some point. But yeah, I would be very interested to see Luke Fickell's contract once that's all finalized.
Yeah, and I'm just looking to see the buyout starts at, this is from The Athletic, the buyout starts at $3.5 million before January 23rd and drops by $500,000 each calendar year. So essentially no buyout, because boy. I'm sure that was by design on his part and his agent's part, and Wisconsin's like, well, if this is what it takes to get you. So there, no buyout.
That is a very interesting data point. Not any conversations I'm anticipating having anytime in the near future, but just that is a very interesting piece of information. Yep.
Keep it in the back of your mind. Who knows? Anyway, that will do it for this episode. I want to thank you all for joining us. Always find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. Say hello to us there. Just had a site-wide chat the past couple of days, letting Ohio State fans get some stuff off their chest, talk about what happened, talk about the next steps moving forward with the Buckeyes. And of course, you can find us at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Go ahead and hit that bell to be notified. Hit the thumbs up on this video if you're watching it there. We would appreciate that. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you all later.